I'm Caitlin E, and welcome back to the Lit Review. Today we're going to be doing my January wrap-up where I tell you what I read and how I felt about it. So I have this system in the hopes that it doesn't become a 40-minute video when I only read 5 books in January. So what that looks like is I will do a rant and a rave, so basically my lowest rated book of the month versus my highest rated book of the month, and those I will let myself talk about them all that I like. Holy crap, can you see how cute the little outside cat is? He's hanging out on a fence. So I will be kind of telling you my full thoughts about my rant and my rave. I try to alternate between which we start with and which we end with so that it's not all one thing. And then for the rest of them, I will be kind of trying to limit myself to 1 to 2 sentences about what I thought or, the summary, some combination thereof. You'll also be seeing these little infographics pop up. They have things like the tropes that I felt were really resonant, as well as the trigger or content warnings that I would want you to prioritize knowing about. Now, that doesn't mean that I am covering every content warning in this little infographic, by the way, so please do your homework if you have things that you know are not for you. You will also see my star rating on those infographics, as well as whether or not I thought the book was spicy, and occasionally, you will see a teardrop, which I want to pause really quickly because I have never explained the teardrop system to you. It's a 1 to 3 tier system. 1 tier means it made me mist up. 2 tiers means that I actually had like some trickle down, and then 3 tiers is I was sobbing and tissues were required. So that's kind of that system. So if you ever see a teardrop show up, that's what we're dealing with. Like I said, I only read 5 books in January, and first of all, I want to say that's tremendously valid. I want to normalize having a slow reading month, and I'm going to put that in scare quotes because honestly, 5 books in a month is a really good number, especially for me. I tend to average like 6 to 7 books a month, so I almost hit my average, but this was also an incredibly intense month for me personally. So January had a lot of highs and lows for me on a personal level. It was my birthday month, which was fantastic. We also finally booked our wedding venue. And then my company, like many companies around this time of year, did a huge layoff. I am very grateful to not be impacted personally by the layoff. I still have my job, but the stress and the grief of that is a very real thing. So this month was kind of intense. It had some high highs and super low lows. As a result of that, I didn't read nearly as much as I thought I was going to this month. That's my little soapbox moment for the day, friends. I don't know. I've just been feeling the pressure to do things a certain way on social media lately, and I realized that that's actually really silly. But enough chit chat, let me actually start talking to you about these books. So yes, January was kind of an intense month for me on an emotional and personal level, but it was also a really good reading month. My lowest rating was a 3-star, and I firmly maintain that that is not inherently a bad thing. You cannot, as a human being, deeply love every single book that you read. The odds are just not in your favor. Now, I see personally 3 stars as like, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I would recommend it to the right person. 3 stars can also be like, hey, I was kind of disappointed. I thought this was going to be a much bigger read for me, but I still had a good time. So sometimes 3 stars are a mixed bag. And I think that's definitely where we ended up today. So I'm going to start with that one because I don't think that my 3-star books this month were bad reads by any stretch of the imagination. So this first one is going into like the rant category, but it's not actually a bad book. And I would probably recommend it to the right subset of you as my audience. Why I think it ended up with a 3-star is because it was an incredibly hyped book that I maybe had strong expectations of, and they just didn't hit. Sometimes that's not fair to the book, but that's also the reality of being a reader sometimes is you want something to hit really bad, and it just doesn't. So I rated A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson 3 stars. I was reading this as part of my January book club pick for the Book Covered Book Club. It is a very ornate cover. I also picked this up because I think last year I made a 5-star prediction video where I was trying to use more data science to try to predict what kind of books I was going to love. And so far, I'm not doing so great. So this was a 3-star read for me. And in part, I feel like I just missed the moment with this book in some way. Like maybe if I had prioritized it when everybody was really like in the cultural conversation of this book from a couple of years ago, maybe I would have felt differently about it. But let's talk about those expectations and why I feel like this book ultimately didn't meet them. When I heard about this book for the first time on YouTube from a bunch of different people, one of the key selling points was that it was this retelling of Dracula through the perspective of Dracula's brides. And hey, what do you know? It was really queer. Which was a huge draw for me. I got really excited about that. I also heard that S.T. Gibson was a very poetic and dreamy writer, which I can really get down with. I like to sink my teeth into some poetic, dreamy books now and again. I also loved that it was short. Like, there was something about that was really kind of like a draw. There was the potential for that to be like a capital R romantic, not like romance like my romance novels, but like romantic like my lit class. In college. And I thought that was just going to be the perfect combination of things. Now, here's the deal. All of those things are true. All of those things that I heard were accurate. Is this a dramatic and interesting retelling of Dracula through the perspective of one of his brides, Constanta? Yes. Is S.T. Gibson's writing lyrical and poetic? Also, yes. Is it queer and polyamorous? Also, yes. And yet I found myself really disappointed because while all of those things are good and things that I like, I was not finding myself connecting with Constanta as a character. Did I sympathize with her or even empathize with her a little bit? Yeah, I did. It's really hard not to. This is a gripping portrayal of somebody who has gone through centuries of domestic abuse, who is trying to find their own way for their first time in their centuries of life in the name of love and self-preservation. And there's something deeply resonant about that. There's something really human about that narrative. There was something in this that just didn't hit for me. Some of it was that I didn't necessarily buy the love that any of these characters had for one another. And so while it was lyrically written, I didn't feel the emotional connection. And I've learned about myself as a reader that that's really important for how I understand a book, is the emotional resonance. It's one of the biggest things that I have as a reader that really will make something hit or not hit for me. So while the writing itself was lyrical and beautiful, the world building wasn't great. It was so heavily character dependent for me that you lost any of the potential awe and interest of building a world across centuries. It was just like kind of casually dropped in different places. Your sense of time didn't really have a strong aspect on the story. You're just kind of enduring with Constanta. And there's something to be said about that as a powerful thing in this narrative, but it just kind of lost me a little bit, which is unfortunate because I do think this is a book that I would recommend to the right type of audience member. If you like books about feminine rage and queer women coming into their own, I do think this is for you. This has potential to be a really gripping read. It just didn't slay me the way I was hoping it would. And that's why it's a 3-star read for me. And that's why it's a very gentle and caring rant instead of one of my more unhinged ones that you sometimes see from me. Now, I don't have a physical copy of this next one because I read it on Kindle Unlimited. So I read The Season of Secrets by QB Tyler through my Kindle Unlimited subscription. This is it's like kind of a novella. It's a little on the shorter side. It's also essentially a prequel to one of her other books that I have not read yet. I'm doing it again. I have to stop myself because that was way more than 1 to 2 sentences. I can't even remember my own rules. I rated The Season of Secrets 3 stars. This is a insta-love, insta-lust age gap romance between a billionaire security firm owner and his secretary. My problem with it was that it was just too insta on most of those counts. I needed more character development and a little bit more building, but the spice was fantastic, as it always is with QB Tyler. Next, I read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Y'all know I was scared of this one. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars though. This is a quirky, cute, office place romantic comedy set in academia between a professor and a grad student, though there is no implicit power dynamics between them. She is not his grad student. That's a really important clarification I want to make. Where it faltered for me is I actually wanted more depth of character development, and I think for me as a reader, it really suffered from being a single POV. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on this, let me know and I'll consider making a more in-depth review video. Then we have the thickest book I read in January, and that is Taming the Wolves by Lix Robinson. This was a 4-star read for me. I will keep my thoughts very brief because if you'd like to know the full depth of my thoughts, I have a review video of the Viking Omegaverse series, which I will link up above. So please go check that out if you want to hear more. But essentially, it is a historical light fantasy with Omegaverse and why choose romance elements. I'm obsessed with it. It's my new catnip. For more thoughts, please go check out the other video. Just for the sake of time, I promise. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be careful about this because my camera battery is slowly draining, but my rave for this month is going to be kind of an emotional one for me, and this is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This was also one of my 5-star predictions last year, and it succeeded. This was a 5-star read for me, easy. Nonfiction can sometimes feel a little tricky to rate, but I gave it 5 stars because it just hit my emotional core really hard. It was deeply resonant. Chanel Miller is a fantastic and compelling writer. If you do not know, or is this your first time hearing about this book, this is the memoir of Chanel Miller, who is the woman who was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner in Stanford in the mid-2000s. He only got like 6 months sentence for his violation of her body, mind, and honestly the violation of the legal system that she had to endure. This is very much a memoir of telling you what it was like to go through the legal process in modern America, or when you were trying to prosecute somebody who has done a level of sexual assault. This is her own reflection on the journey, the difficulty she had through recovery, as well as her experience of what it was like to constantly be reliving that experience for multiple years in the process for justice. It is an indictment of the American criminal justice system and how it treats women, but it is also not pointing fingers directly. It is not name-calling the judges or even Brock Turner himself. She gives so much reluctant grace and space, even though she is full of rage at the same time, and I think there's something really powerful about that. Crucially, when I say she gives grace and space, that is not to say that she lets anybody have a free pass. She is ardently pointing out what is wrong with our system, what is wrong with our culture, and it was a very profound read. I cried during reading this as somebody who has also been through assault. She gave voice to so many things and feelings that I have often struggled to articulate, and the expectations that we often hold people who are labeled survivors to. The way she writes is powerful. I very fervently hope that Chanel Miller continues to write because she's really freaking good at it. I listened to this as well as read it, so it's one of the few books I can say that I've genuinely kind of done a bit of both with. That's not normally how I read. I'm normally a much more physical reader. I want to point out that this is a hard read. This is not going to be for everybody. Just because I gave it a 5-star doesn't mean you should read it. Please take care of yourself. Please think about the impact of the potential trigger warnings that I've got here on the infographic for you, because it's not always going to be necessary. Just because it helped me and gave me some catharsis doesn't mean that it's for every reader. And I think that gets to be okay. I really want to make space for that here too, because I honestly tried and failed to read this book 3 times before I finally finished it. I was not in the right headspace for many years to be able to read Chanel Miller's story and connect with my own. I was finally at a point where I felt safe and comfortable enough to do so. So if you are ever at the point where that is an option for you, I would encourage it because it is beautifully well written. But I also want to normalize that you don't have to. Just because something is good or well written or beautiful doesn't mean that it is good or well written or beautiful for you. So again, highly recommend this if you're in the right headspace. If you are in the mood to receive that kind of experience and firsthand account, do so, but do so with care and caution. So this is my absolute rave for the month. I am so glad that I finally read it. And I'm also so glad that it was actually a 5-star read for me, because as you can see in this video, I went from one that just didn't hit to one that absolutely slapped. That's also what I mean by it was a small reading month, but it was a really impactful reading month. I have no regrets. I'm very glad to have read all of these. Even my worst was really quite good. It was just maybe not 100% what I wanted. So hopefully you enjoyed hearing my in-depth thoughts on these books. If you would like me to review any of the books that I did kind of like light bite reviews for, let me know in the comments below. I had such a good time reviewing Tamed by the Wolves and its first book, Stolen by the Wolves, that I'm actually more open to doing reviews if that's something you would like to see here on this channel. So just let me know what you think down below. All right. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope you have a fantastic reading day or night, depending on when you see this video, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!
Hold on, girl, now